Chapter 7. Expect the best and get it. Why does my boy fail in every job he gets? Asks a puzzled father about his 30-year-old son. It was indeed difficult to understand the failure of this young man, for seemingly he had everything. Of good family, his educational and business opportunities were beyond the average. Nevertheless, he had a tragic flair for failure. Everything he touched went wrong. He tried hard enough, yet somehow he missed success. Presently, he found an answer, a curiously simple but potent answer. After practicing this newfound secret for a while, he lost the flair for failure and acquired the touch of success. His personality began to focus, his powers to fuse. Not long ago at luncheon, I could not help admiring this dynamic man at the height of his power. "You amaze me," I commented. "A few years ago, you were failing at everything. Now you have worked up an original idea into a fine business. You're a leader in your community. Please explain this remarkable change in you." "Really, it was quite simple," he replied. "I merely learned the magic of believing. I discovered that if you expect the worst, you will get the worst, and if you expect the best, you will get the best. It all happened through actually practicing a verse from the Bible." "And what is that verse?" "If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth." Mark 9 verse 23. "I was brought up into a religious home," he explained, "and heard that verse many times, but it never had any effect upon me. One day in my church, I heard you emphasize those words in a talk. In a flash of insight, I realized that the key I had missed was that my mind was not trained to believe, to think positively, to have faith in either God or myself. I followed your suggestion of putting myself in God's hands and practiced your outlined techniques of faith. I trained myself to think positively about everything. Along with that, I tried to live right." He smiled and said, "God and I struck up a partnership. When I adopted that policy, things began to change almost at once for me. I got into the habit of expecting the best, not the worst, and that is the way my affairs have turned out lately. I guess it's kind of a miracle, isn't it?" he asked as he concluded his fascinating story. But it wasn't miraculous at all. Actually, what had happened was that he had learned to use one of the most powerful laws in the world, a law recognized alike by psychology and religion, namely, change your mental habits to believe instead of disbelief. Learn to expect, not to doubt. In so doing, you bring everything into the realm of possibility. This does not mean that by believing you are necessarily going to get everything you want or think you want. Perhaps that would not be good for you. When you put your trust in God, He guides your mind so that you do not want things that are not good for you or that are inharmonious with God's will. But it does definitely mean that when you learn to believe, then that which has seemingly been impossible moves into the area of the possible. Every great thing at last becomes, for you, a possibility. William James, the famous psychologist, said, "Our belief at the beginning of a doubtful undertaking is the one no. Is the one thing, no, get that, is the one thing that ensures the successful outcome of your venture. To learn to believe is of primary importance. It is a basic factor of succeeding in an undertaking. When you expect the best, you release a magnetic force in your mind which by a law of attraction tends to bring the best to you. But if you expect the worst, you release from your mind the power of repulsion, which tends to force the best from you. It is amazing how a sustained expectation of the best sets in motion forces which cause the best to materialize." An interesting illustration of this fact was described some years ago by Hugh Fullerton, a famous sports writer of a bygone era. "As a boy, Hugh Fullerton was my favorite writer of sports stories. One story which I have never forgotten concerned Josh O'Reilly, one-time manager of the San Antonio club of the Texas League. O'Reilly had a roster of great players, 7 of whom had been hitting over 300, and everybody thought his team would easily take the championship. But the club fell into a slump and lost 17 of the first 20 games. The players simply couldn't hit anything, and each began to accuse the other of being a jinx to the team. Playing the Dallas club, a rather poor team that year, Only one San Antonio player got a hit, and that, strangely enough, was the pitcher. O'Reilly's team was badly beaten that day. In the clubhouse after the game, the players were a disconsolate lot. Josh O'Reilly knew that he had an aggregation of stars, and he realized that their trouble was simply that they were thinking wrong. They didn't expect to get a hit. They didn't expect to win. They expected to be defeated. They were thinking not victory, but defeat. Their mental pattern was not one of expectation, but of doubt. This negative mental process inhibited them, froze their muscles, threw them off their timing, and there was no free flow of easy power through the team. It so happened that a preacher named Slater was popular in that neighborhood at that time. He claimed to be a faith healer and apparently was getting some astounding results. Throngs crowded to hear him, and most everybody had confidence in him. Perhaps the fact that they did believe in his power enabled Slater to achieve results. O'Reilly asked each player to lend him his 2 best bats. Then he asked the members of the team to stay in the clubhouse until he returned. He put the bats in a wheelbarrow and went off with them. He was gone for an hour. He returned jubilantly to tell the players that Slater, the preacher, had blessed the bats and that these bats now contained a power that could not be overcome. The players were astounded and delighted. The next day, they overwhelmed Dallas, getting 37 base hits and 20 runs. They hammered their way through the league to a championship. And Hugh Fuller said that for years in the Southwest, a player could pay a large sum for a Slater bat. Regardless of Slater's personal power, the fact remains that something tremendous happened in the minds of those baseball players. Their thought pattern was changed. They began thinking in terms of expectation, not doubt. They expected not the worst, but the best. They expected hits, runs, victories, and they got them. They had the power to get what they wanted. There was no difference in the bats themselves. I am quite sure of that, but there was certainly a difference in the minds of the men who used them. Now they knew they could make hits. Now they knew they could get runs. Now they knew they could win. A new thought pattern changed the minds of those men so that the creative power of faith could operate. Perhaps you have not been doing so well in the game of life. Perhaps you stand up to bat and cannot make a hit. You strike out time and time again and your batting average is lamentably low. Let me give you a suggestion. I guarantee that it will work. The basis for my assurance is the fact that thousands of people have been trying it with great results. Things will be very different for you if you will give this method a real trial. Start reading the New Testament and notice the number of times it refers to faith. Select a dozen of the strongest statements about faith, the ones that you like the best. Then memorize each one. Let these faith concepts drop into your subconscious mind and say them over and over again, especially just before going to sleep at night. By a process of spiritual osmosis, they will sink into your conscious and into your subconscious mind, and in time will modify and reslant your basic thought pattern. This process will change you into a believer, into an expector, and when you become such, you will in due course become an achiever. You will have new power to get what God and you decide you really want from life. The most powerful force in human nature is the spiritual power technique taught in the Bible. Very astutely, the Bible emphasizes the method by which a person can make something of himself. Faith, belief, positive thinking, faith in God, faith in other people, faith in yourself, faith in life. This is the essence of the technique that teaches, if thou canst believe, it says, all things are possible to him that believeth. Mark 9 verse 23. If ye have faith, nothing shall be impossible unto you. Matthew 17 verse 20. According to your faith, be it unto you. Matthew 9 verse 29. Believe, so it drives home the truth that faith moves mountains. Some skeptical person who has never learned this powerful law of the effect of right thinking may doubt my assertions regarding the amazing results which happen when this technique is employed. Things become better when you expect the best instead of the worst. For the reasons that being freed from self-doubt, you can put your whole self into your endeavor, and nothing can stand in the way of the man who focuses his entire self on a problem. When you approach a difficulty as a personal unity, the difficulty, which itself is a demonstration of this unity, tends to deteriorate. When the entire concentration of all your force, physical, emotional, and spiritual, is brought to bear, the consolidation of these powers, properly employed, is quite irresistible. Expecting the best means that you put your whole heart, that is, the central essence of your personality, into what you want to accomplish. People are defeated in life not because of lack of ability, but for lack of wholeheartedness. They do not wholeheartedly expect to succeed. Their heart isn't in it, which is to say, they themselves are not fully given. Results do not yield themselves to the person who refuses to give himself to the desired results. A major key to success in this life, to attaining that which you deeply desire, is to be completely released and throw all there is of yourself into your job or any project in which you are engaged. In other words, whatever you are doing, give it your all you got. Give every bit of yourself. Hold nothing back. Life cannot deny itself to the person who gives life his all. But most people, unfortunately, don't do that. In fact, very few people do, and this is the tragic cause of failure. Or, if not failure, it is the reason we only half attain. A famous Canadian athletic coach, Ace Percival, says that most people, athletes as well as non-athletes, are holdouts. That is to say, they are always keeping something in reserve. They do not invest themselves 100% in competition. Because of that fact, they never achieve the highest of which they are capable. Red Barber, a famous baseball announcer, told me that he had known few athletes who completely give themselves. Don't be a holdout, go all out. Do this and life will not hold out on you. A famous trapeze artist was instructing his students not to perform on the high trapeze bar. Finally, having given full explanation and instruction in this skill, he told them to demonstrate their ability. One student, looking up at the insincere perch upon which he must perform, was suddenly filled with fear. He froze completely. He had a terrifying vision of himself falling to the ground. He couldn't move a muscle. So deep was his fright. I can't do it. I can't do it, he gasped. The instructor put his arm around the boy's shoulder and said, Son, you can do it, and I will tell you how. Then he made a statement which is of inestimable importance. It is one of the wisest remarks I have ever heard. He said, Throw your heart over the bar and move your body, and your body will follow. Copy that one sentence. Write it on a card and put it in your pocket. Place it under the glass on your desktop. Tack it up on your wall. Stick it in your shaving mirror. Better still, write it on your mind. You who really want to do something with life, it's packed with power, that sentence. Throw your heart over the bar and your body will follow. Heart is a symbol of creative activity. Fire the heart with where you want to go and what you want to be. Get it so deeply fixed in your unconscious that you will not take no for an answer. Then your entire personality will follow your heart leads. Throw your heart over the bar means to throw your faith over your difficulty. Throw your affirmation over every barrier. Throw your visualization over your obstacles. In other words, throw the spiritual essence of you over the bar, and your material self will follow in the victory groove thus pioneered by your faith-inspired mind. Expect the best, not the worst, and you will attain your heart's desire. It is what is in your heart that you, either good or bad, strong or weak, that finally comes to you. Emerson said, Beware of what you want, for you will get it. That this philosophy is of practical value is illustrated by the experience of a young woman whom I interviewed a number of years ago. She made an appointment to see me in my office at 2 o'clock on a certain afternoon. Being quite busy that day, I had gotten a little behind schedule, and it was about 5 minutes after 2 when I walked into the conference room where she was waiting. It was obvious that she was displeased, for her lips were pressed firmly together. It's 5 minutes after 2, and we had an appointment at 2 p.m., she said. I always admire promptness. So do I. I always believe in being prompt, and I hope you will forgive me for my unavoidable delay, I said with a smile. But she was not in a smiling mood, for she said crisply, I have a very important problem to present to you, and I want an answer, and I expect an answer. Then she shot out at me. I might as well put it to you bluntly. I want to get married. Well, I replied, that is a perfectly normal desire, and I should like to help you. I wanted to know why I can't get married, she continued. Every time I form a friendship with a man, the next thing I know, he fades out of the picture and another chance is gone by. And she added, speaking frankly, I am not getting any younger. You conduct a personal problem clinic to study people and you have had some experience, and I am putting my problem right up to you. Tell me, why can't I get married? I studied her to see if she was the kind of person to whom one could speak frankly, for certain things had to be said if she really meant business. Finally, I decided that she was of big enough caliber to take the medicine that would be required if she was to correct her personality difficulties. So I said, well, now let's analyze the situation. Obviously, you have a good mind and a fine personality, and if I may say so, you are a very handsome lady. All of these things were true. I congratulated her in every way that I honestly could. But then I said, I think that I see your difficulty and it is this. You took me to task because I was 5 minutes late for our appointment. You were really quite severe with me. Has it ever occurred to you that your attitude represents a pretty serious fault? I think a husband would have a very difficult time if you checked him up that closely all the time. In fact, you would so dominate him that even if you did marry, your marital life would be unsatisfactory. Love cannot live under domination. Then I said, you have a very firm way of pressing your lips together, which indicates a domineering attitude. The average male, I might as well tell you, does not like to be dominated, at least so that he knows it. Then I added, I think you would be a very attractive person if you got those two firm lines out of your face. You must have a little softness, a little tenderness, and those lines are too firm to be soft. Then I observed her dress, which was obviously quite expensive, but she didn't wear it very well. So I said, this may be a bit out of my line and I hope you won't mind, but perhaps you could get that dress to hang a little better. I know my description was awkward, but she was a good sport about it and laughed right out loud. She said, you certainly don't use style phraseology, but I get the idea. Then I suggested, perhaps it might help to get your hair fixed up a little. It's a little floaty. Then you might also add a little sweet smelling perfume, just a whiff of it. But the really important thing is to get a new attitude that will change the lines on your face and give you that indefinable quality known as spiritual joy. This, I am certain, will release charm and loveliness in you. Well, she burst out, never did I expect to get this combination of advice in a minister's office. No, I chuckled. I suppose not. But nowadays we have to cover the whole field in a human problem. Then I told her about an old professor of mine at Ohio Wesleyan University, Raleigh Walker, who said, God runs a beauty parlor. He explained that some girls, when they came to college, were very pretty, but when they came back to visit the campus 30 years later, their beauty had faded. The moonlight and Rose's loveliness of their youth did not last. On the other hand, other girls came to college who were very plain, but when they returned 30 years later, they were beautiful women. What made the difference? He asked. The latter had the beauty of an inner spiritual life written on their faces. And then he added, God runs a beauty parlor. Well, this young lady thought about what I told her for a few minutes, and then she said, there's a lot of truth in what you say. I'll try it. Here is where her strong personality proved effective, for she did try it. A number of years went by and I had forgotten her. Then in a certain city, after making a speech, a very lovely looking lady with a fine looking man and a little boy about 10 years of age came up to me. The lady asked smilingly, well, how do you think it hangs? How do I think what hangs? I asked, puzzled. My dress, she said. Do you think it hangs right? Bewildered, I said, yes, I think it hangs all right, but just why do you ask? Don't you know me? She asked. I see a great many people in my life, I asked. Frankly, no, I don't think I've ever seen you before. Then she reminded me of our talk of years ago, which I have described. Meet my husband and my little boy. What you told me was absolutely true, she said very earnestly. I was the most frustrated, unhappy individual imaginable when I came to see you, but I put into practice the principles you suggested. I really did, and they worked. Her husband then spoke up and said, "There was never a sweeter person in the world than Mary here." And I must say that she looked the part. She had evidently visited God's beauty parlor. Not only did she experience a softening and mellowing of her inner spirit, but she properly used the great quality which she possessed, namely the driving force to get what she wanted. This led her to the point where she was willing to change herself so that her dreams could be realized. She had that quality of mind whereby she took herself in hand, she applied the spiritual techniques, and she had a profound and yet simple faith that what her heart told her she wanted could be obtained by the proper creative and positive procedures. So the formula is to know what you want. Test it to see if it is a right thing. Change yourself in such a manner that it will naturally come to you, and always have faith. With the creative force of belief, you stimulate that particular gathering together of circumstances, which brings your cherished wish to pass. Students of modern dynamic thought are realizing more and more the practical value of the ideas and teachings of Jesus, especially such truths as the dictum, "According to your faith, be it unto you." Matthew 9, verse 29. According to your faith in yourself, according to your faith in your job, according to your faith in God, this far will you get and no further. If you believe in your job and in yourself and the opportunities of your country, and if you believe in God and will work hard and study and put yourself into it, in other words, if you throw your heart over the bar, you can swing up to any high place to which you want to take your life and your service and your achievement. Whenever you have a bar, that is to say a barrier in front of you, stop, close your eyes, visualize everything that is above the bar and nothing that is below it. Then imaginatively throw your heart over that bar and see yourself as being given lifting power to rise above it. Believe that you are experiencing this upthrust of force. You will be amazed at the lifting force you will receive. If in the depth of your mind you visualize the best and employ the powers of faith and energy, you will get the best. Naturally, in this process of achieving the best, it is important to know where you want to go in life. You can reach your goal, your best dreams can come true. You can get where you want to go only if you know what your goal is. Your expectation must have a clearly defined objective. Lots of people get nowhere simply because they do not know where they want to go. They have no clear-cut, precisely defined purpose. You cannot expect the best if you think aimlessly. A young man of 26 consulted me because he was dissatisfied with his job. He was ambitious to fill a bigger niche in life and wanted to know how to improve his circumstances. His motive seemed unselfish and entirely worthwhile. "Well, where do you want to go?" I asked. "I just don't know exactly," he said hesitantly. "I have never given it any thought. I only know I want to go somewhere other than where I am." "What can you do best?" I then asked. "What are your strong points?" "I don't know," he responded. "I never thought that over either." "But what would you like to do if you had your choice? What do you really want to do?" I insisted. "I just can't say," he replied dully. "I don't really know what I would like to do. I never thought it over. Guess I ought to figure that one out too." "Now, look here," I said. "You want to go somewhere from where you are, but you don't know where you want to go. You don't know what you can do or what you would like to do. You will have to get your ideas organized before you can expect to start getting anywhere." That is the failure point with many people. They never get anywhere because they have only a hazy idea where they want to go, what they want to do. No objective leads to no end. We made a thorough analysis, testing this young man's capabilities, and found some assets of personality he did not know he possessed. But it was necessary to supply a dynamic to move him forward, so we taught him the techniques of practical faith. Today, he is on the way to achievement. Now he knows where he wants to go and how to get there. He knows what the best is and he expects to attain it, and he will. Nothing can stop him. I asked an outstanding newspaper editor, an inspiring personality, "How did you get to be the editor of this important paper?" "I wanted to be there," he replied simply. "Is that all there is to it?" I asked. "You wanted to be, and so there you are." "Well, that may not be all of it, but that was a large part of the process," he explained. "I believe that if you want to get somewhere, you must first decide definitely where you want to be or what you want to accomplish. Be sure it is a right objective. Then photograph this objective on your mind and hold it there. Work hard, believe in it, and the thought will become so powerful that it will tend to assure success. There is a deep tendency, he declared, to become what your mind pictures, provided you hold the mental picture strongly enough and if the objective is sound. So saying, the editor pulled a well worn card from his wallet and said, I repeat this quotation every day of my life. It has become my dominating thought. I copied it and I'm giving it to you. A person who is self reliant, positive, optimistic, and undertakes his work with the assurance of success magnetizes his condition. He draws to himself the creative powers of the universe. It is indeed a fact that the person who thinks with positive self reliance and optimism does magnetize his condition and release his power to attain his goal. So expect the best at all times. Never think of the worst. Drop it out of your thought. Relegate it. Let there be no thought in your mind that the worst will happen. Avoid entertaining the concept of the worst, for whatever you take into your mind can grow there. Therefore, take the best into your mind and only that. Nurture it, concentrate on it, emphasize it, visualize it, prayerize it, surround it with faith. Make it your obsession. Expect the best, and spiritually, creative mind power aided by God power will produce the best. It may be that as you read this book, you are down to what you think is the worst, and you may remark that no amount of thinking will affect your situation. The answer to that objection is that it simply isn't so. Even if you may be down to the worst, the best is potentially within you. You have only to find it, release it, and rise up with it. This requires courage and character, to be sure, but the main requirement is faith. Cultivate faith, and you will have the necessary courage and character. A woman was compelled by adversity to go into sales work, a type of activity for which she had no training. She undertook to demonstrate vacuum cleaners from house to house. She took a negative attitude toward herself and her work. She just didn't believe she could do this job. She knew she was going to fail. She feared to approach a house even though she came for a requested demonstration. She believed that she could not make the sale. As a result, as is not surprising, she failed in a high percentage of her interviews. One day, she chanced to call upon a woman who evidenced consideration beyond the average. To this customer, the saleswoman poured out her tale of defeat and powerlessness. The other woman listened patiently, then said quietly, If you expect failure, you will get failure. But if you expect to succeed, I am sure you will succeed. And she added, I will give you a formula which I believe will help you. It will restyle your thinking, give you new confidence, and help you to accomplish your goals. Repeat this formula before every call. Believe in it and then marvel at what it will do for you. This is it. If God before us, who can be against us? Romans 8 verse 31. But change it by personalizing it so that you say, if God before me, who can be against me? If God before me, then I know that with God's help I can sell vacuum cleaners. God realizes that you want security and support for your little children and yourself, and by practicing the method I suggest, you will be given power to get what you want. She learned to utilize this formula. She approached each house expecting to get a sale, affirming and picturizing positive, not negative results. As the saleswoman employed this principle, she presently acquired new courage, new faith, and a deeper confidence in her own ability. Now she declares, God helps me sell vacuum cleaners, and who can dispute it? It is a well-defined and authentic principle that what the mind profoundly expects, it tends to receive. Perhaps this is true because what you really expect is what you actually want, unless you really want something sufficiently to create an atmosphere of positive factors by your dynamic desire. It is likely to elude you. If with all your heart, that is the secret. If with all your heart, that is to say, if with the full complement of your personality you reach out creatively toward your heart's desire, your reach will not be in vain. Let me give you 4 words as a formulation of a great law. Faith power works wonders. Those 4 words are packed with dynamic and creative force. Hold them in your conscious mind. Let them sink into the unconscious and they can help you overcome any difficulty. Hold them in your thoughts. Say them over and over again. Say them until your mind accepts them, until you believe them. Faith power works wonders. I have no doubt about the effectiveness of this concept, for I have seen it work so often that my enthusiasm for faith power is absolutely boundless. You can overcome any obstacle. You can achieve the most tremendous things by faith power. And how do you develop faith power? The answer is to saturate your mind with the great words of the Bible. If you will spend 1 hour a day reading the Bible and committing its great passages to memory, thus allowing them to recondition your personality, the change in you and in your experience will be little short of miraculous. Just one section of the Bible will accomplish this for you. The 11th chapter of Mark is enough. You will find the secret in the following words, and this is one of the greatest formulas the book contains. Have faith in God. That's positive, isn't it? For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say unto this, my italics, mountain, that's specific, be thou removed, that is, stand aside, and be thou cast into the sea, that means out of sight. Anything you threw into the sea is gone for good. The Titanic lies at the bottom of the sea, and the sea bottom is lined with ships. Cast your opposition, called a mountain, into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart. Why does this statement use the word heart? Because it means you are not to doubt in your subconscious, in the inner essence of you. It isn't so superficial as a doubt in the conscious mind. That is a normal, intelligent questioning. It's a deep, fundamental doubt that is to be avoided, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass. He shall have whatsoever he saith. Mark 11, verses 22 to 23. This is not some theory that I have thought up. It is taught by the most reliable book known to man. Generation after generation, no matter what develops in the way of knowledge and science, the Bible is read by more people than any other book. Humanity rightly has more confidence in it than any other document ever written. And the Bible tells us that faith power works wonders. The reason, however, that great things do not happen to some people is that they are not specific in their application of faith. We are told, "Ye shall say to this mountain." That is to say, do not address your efforts to the entire mountain range of all your difficulties, but attack one thing that may be defeating you at the moment. Be specific. Take them on one by one. If there is something you want, how do you go about getting it? In the first place, ask yourself, should I want it? Test that question very honestly in prayer to be sure you should want it and whether you should have it. If you can answer that question in the affirmative, then ask God for it and don't be backward in asking Him. And if God, having more insight, believes that you shouldn't have it, you need not worry. He won't give it to you. But if it is a right thing, ask Him for it. And when you ask, do not doubt in your heart. Be specific. The validity of this law was impressed upon me by something that a friend of mine, a Midwestern businessman, told me. This man is a big, outgoing, lovable gentleman, a truly great Christian. He teaches the largest Bible class in his state. In the town where he lives, he is Mr. Town himself. He is head of a plant employing 40,000 people. His office desk is full of religious literature. He even has some of my sermons and pamphlets there. In his plant, one of the biggest in the United States, he manufactures refrigerators. He's one of those whole-souled, rugged individuals who has the capacity to have faith. He believes that God is right there in his office with him. My friend said, preach a big faith, not any little old watered down faith. Don't be afraid that faith isn't scientific enough. I am a scientist, he said. I use science in my business every day, and I use the Bible every day. The Bible will work. Everything in the Bible works if you believe in it. When he was made general manager of this plant, it was whispered around town. Now that Mr. is general manager, we'll have to bring our Bibles to work with us. After a few days, he called into his office some of his men who were making this remark. He uses language they understand. And he said, I hear you guys are going around town saying that no, I am general manager. You'll have to bring your Bibles to work with you. Oh, we didn't mean that, they said in embarrassment. He said, well, that's a good idea, but I don't want you to come lugging them under your arms. Bring them here in your hearts and in your minds. If you come with a spirit of goodwill and faith in your hearts and minds, believe me, we'll do business. So, he said, the kind of faith to have is the specific kind, the kind that moves this particular mountain. Suddenly he said to me, did you ever have a toe bother you? I was rather astonished by that. But before I could answer, he said, I had a toe that bothered me, and I took it to the doctors here in town, and they are wonderful doctors, and they said there wasn't anything wrong with the toe that they could see. But they were wrong because it hurt. So I went out and got a book on anatomy and read up on toes. It is really a simple construction. There is nothing but a few muscles and ligaments and a bony structure. It seemed that anybody who knows anything about a toe could fix it. But I couldn't get anybody to fix that toe, and it hurt me all the time. So I sat down one day and took a look at the toe. Then I said, Lord, I am sending this toe right back to the plant. You made that toe. I make refrigerators, and I know all there is to know about a refrigerator. When we all sell a refrigerator, we guarantee the customer service. If his refrigerator doesn't work right, and if our service agents can't fix it, he brings it back to the plant and we fix it, because we know how. So I said, Lord, if you made this toe, you manufactured it, and your service agents, the doctors, don't seem to know how to get it working right, and if you don't mind, Lord, I would like to have it fixed up as soon as possible, because it's bothering me. How is the toe now? I asked. Perfect, he replied. Perhaps this is a foolish kind of story, and I laughed when he told it. But I almost cried, too, for I saw a wonderful look on that man's face as he related that incident of a specific prayer. Be specific. Ask God for any right thing, but as a little child, don't doubt. Doubt closes the power flow. Faith opens it. The power of faith is so tremendous that there is nothing that Almighty God cannot do for us, with us, or through us if we let Him channel His power through our minds. So roll those words around on your tongue. Say them over and over again until they lodge deeply in your mind, until they get down into your heart, until they take possession of the essence of you. Whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass. He shall have whatsoever he saith. Mark 11, verse 23. I suggested these principles some months ago to an old friend of mine, a man who perpetually expects the worst. Up to the time of our discussion, never did I hear him say anything other than that things would not turn out right. He took this negative attitude toward every project or problem. He expressed vigorous disbelief in the principles outlined in this chapter and offered to make a test to prove that I am wrong in my conclusions. He is an honest man, and he faithfully tried these principles in connection with several matters and actually kept a scorecard. He did this for 6 months. He volunteered the information at the end of that period that 85% of the matters under investigation had turned out satisfactorily. I am now convinced, he said, although I wouldn't have believed it possible, but it is evidently a fact that if you expect the best, you are given some strange kind of power to create conditions that produce the desired results. From now on, I am changing my mental attitude and expect the best, not the worst. My test indicates that this is not theory, but a scientific way to meet life situations. I might add that even the high percentage he attained can be raised with practice, And of course, practice in the art of expectation is as essential as practice on a musical instrument or with a golf club. Nobody ever mastered any skill except through intensive, persistent, and intelligent practice. Also, it shall be noted that my friend approached this experiment at first in a spirit of doubt, which would tend adversely to affect his earlier results. Every day, as you confront the problems of life, I suggest that you affirm as follows: I believe God gives me power to attain what I really want. Never mention the worst. Never think of it. Drop it out of your consciousness. At least 10 times every day affirm, I expect the best and with God's help will attain the best. In so doing, your thoughts will turn towards the best and become conditioned to its realization. This practice will bring all of your powers to focus upon the attainment of the best. It will bring the best to you. Chapter 8. I don't believe in defeat. If you are thinking thoughts of defeat, I urge you to rid yourself of such thoughts. For as you think defeat, you tend to get it. Adopt the I don't believe in defeat attitude. I want to tell you about some people who have put this philosophy into effect with excellent results and shall explain the techniques and formulas which they use so successfully. If you read these techniques carefully and thoughtfully and believe as they did and think positively and put these techniques into operation, you too can overcome defeats which at the present moment may seem inevitable. I hope you are not like an obstacle man of whom I was told. He was called an obstacle man because regardless of whatever suggestion was advanced, his mind instantly went to all possible obstacles in connection with it. But he met his match and learned a lesson, which helped to change his negative attitude. It came about in the following manner. The directors of his firm had a project under consideration which involved considerable expense and some definite hazards as well as successful possibilities. In the discussions regarding this venture, the obstacle man would invariably say, and always with a scholarly air, invariably this type acts wise, probably a cover-up for inner doubt feelings. No, just a moment, let's consider the obstacles involved. Another man who said very little but who was represented by his associates for his ability and achievements and for a certain indomitable quality which characterized him, presently spoke up and asked, why do you constantly emphasize the obstacles in this proposition instead of the possibilities? Because, replied the obstacle man, to be intelligent one must always be realistic, and it is a fact that there are certain definite obstacles in connection with this project. What attitude would you take toward these obstacles, may I ask? The other man unhesitantly replied, what attitude would I take toward these obstacles? Why, I would just remove them, that's all, and then I would forget them. But, said the obstacle man, that is easier said than done. You say you would remove them and then you would forget them. May I ask if you have any technique for removing obstacles and for forgetting them that the rest of us have never discovered? A slow smile came over the face of the other man as he said, son, I have spent my entire life removing obstacles, and I never yet saw one that could not be removed, provided you had enough faith and guts and you are willing to work. Since you want to know how it's done, I will show you. He then reached into his pocket and took out his wallet. In the windowed section was a card on which were written some words. He shoved the wallet across the table and said, there, son, read that. That is my formula. And don't give me the song and dance that it won't work either. I know better from experience. The obstacle man picked up the wallet and with a strange look on his face, read the words to himself. Read them out loud, urged the owner of the wallet. This is what we read in a slow, dubious voice. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Philippians 4 verse 13. The owner of the wallet put it back in his pocket and said, I have lived a long time and have faced a lot of difficulties in my time, but there is power in those words, actual power, and with them you can remove any obstacle. He said this with confidence, and everybody knew he meant it. This positiveness, together with the facts of his experience, which were known to all, for he was a remarkable man who had overcome many odds, and because of the further fact that he was not in any sense holier than thou, made his words convincing to the man around the table. At any rate, there was no more negative talk. The project was put into operation and, despite difficulties and risk, turned out successfully. The technique used by this man is based on the primary fact about an obstacle, which is don't be afraid of it. Practice believing that God is with you, and that in combination with Him, you have the power to handle it. So, the first thing to do about an obstacle is simply to stand up to it and not complain about it or whine under it, but forthrightly attack it. Do not go crawling through life on your hands and knees, half defeated. Stand up to your obstacles and do something about them. You will find that they haven't half the strength you think they have. A friend of mine sent me a book by Winston Churchill entitled Maxims and Reflections. In this book, Churchill tells of the British Major General Sir Henry Hugh Tudor, who commanded a division of the British Fifth Army which faced the great German assault in March 1918. The odds were heavily against him, but General Tudor knew how to meet an apparently immovable and undefeatable obstacle. His method was simple. He merely stood and let the obstacle break on him, and he, in turn, broke the obstacle. Here is what Churchill said about General Tudor. This is a very great sentence, and it fills with power. The impression I had of Tudor was of an iron peg hammered into the frozen ground, immovable. General Tudor knew how to stand up to an obstacle. Just stand up to it, that's all, and don't give way under it, and it will finally break. You will break it. Something has to break, and it won't be you. It will be the obstacle. You can do this when you have faith, faith in God and faith in yourself. Faith is the chief quality you need. It is enough. In fact, it is more than enough. Use that formula which the businessman suggested, and you will develop this brand of powerful faith in God and in yourself. You will learn to know yourself, your own ability, your power to do things. To the degree to which your attitude shifts from negative to positive, the mastery touch will come to you. Then, with assurance, you can say to yourself under any and all circumstances and mean it, I don't believe in defeat. Take the story of Pancho Gonzalez, who won the national tennis championship in a grueling battle. He had been practically unknown, and because of wet weather, he had not been able to perfect his game prior to the tournament. The sports writer of a metropolitan newspaper, in analyzing Gonzalez, said that there were certain defects in his techniques, and gave it as his opinion that probably greater champions had played on the courts. However, he credited Gonzalez with a marvelous serve and a skillful volley. But the factor that won the championship, said the writer, was his staying power and the further fact that he was never defeated by the discouraging vicissitudes of the game. That is one of the most subtle lines I have ever read in any sports story. He was never defeated by the discouraging vicissitudes of the game. It means, does it not, that when the game seemed to go against him, he did not let discouragement creep in nor negative thoughts dominate and thus lose the power needed to win. This mental and spiritual quality made that man a champion. He was able to face obstacles, to stand up to them and overcome them. Faith supplies staying power. It contains dynamic to keep one going when the going is hard. Anybody can keep going when the going is good, but some extra ingredient is needed to enable you to keep fighting when it seems that everything is against you. It is a great secret, that of never being defeated by the discouraging vicissitudes of the game. You may counter, but you don't know my circumstances. I am in a different situation than anybody else, and I am as far down as a human being can get. In that case, you are fortunate, for if you are as far down as you can get, there is no further down you can go. There is only one direction you can take from this position, and that is up. So your situation is quite encouraging. However, I caution you not to take the attitude that you are in a situation in which nobody has ever been before. There is no such situation. Practically speaking, there are only a few human stories, and they have all enacted previously. This is a fact that you must never forget. There are people who have overcome every conceivable difficult situation, even the one in which you now find yourself, and which to you seems utterly hopeless. So did it seem to some others, but they found an out, a way up, a path over, a pass through. One of the most inspiring illustrations of this act is the story of Amos Parrish, who twice every year brought together hundreds of leading department store executives and style experts in two huge clinics held in the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. At these clinics, Mr. Parrish gave advice to the merchants and their associates on business trends, on merchandise, on selling methods, and other matters important to the conduct of their business. Having attended a number of the clinics, however, I am convinced that the greatest values Mr. Parrish transmitted to his customers were courage and positive thinking, a deep belief in themselves, and the confidence that they can overcome all difficulties. He was a living example of a philosophy which he taught. As a boy, he was sickly. Moreover, he stuttered. He was sensitive and a victim of an inferiority complex. It was thought that he would not live because of his weakened physical condition. But one day, Amos Parrish had a spiritual experience. Faith dawned in his mind, and from then on, he knew that with the help of God and the utilization of his own powers, he could achieve. He developed a unique idea of service to businessmen, and so highly did they rate it that they were willing to pay large fees to attend a 2-day session twice a year under the business wisdom and inspiration of Amos Parrish. To me, it was a moving experience to sit with that big crowd in a hotel ballroom and listen to AP, as he was affectionately called, talk positive thinking to those important businessmen and women. Sometimes he had the greatest difficulty with his stuttering, but he was never discouraged. He referred to it frankly and with a sense of humor. One day, for example, he was trying to say the word Cadillac. He tried several times and was unable to get it out, and finally did so with a powerful effort. Then he commented, "I can't even say Cadillac, let alone buy one." The audience roared with laughter, but I noted that they looked up at him with affection written on their faces. Everyone left a meeting at which he spoke with the conviction that they too could turn their obstacles into assets. Again, I repeat, there is no difficulty you cannot overcome. A wise and philosophical Negro man once said to me, when asked how he overcame his difficulties, "How do I get through a trouble?" "Well, first I try to go around it, and if I can't go around it, I try to get under it. And if I can't get under it, I try to go over it. And if I can't get over it, I just plow right through it." Then he added, "God and I will plow right through it." Take seriously that formula of a businessman given earlier in this chapter. Stop reading for a moment and repeat it over to yourself 5 times, and each time you say it, conclude with this affirmation: I believe that. Here is the formula again. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. Philippians 4 verse 13. Say that 5 times every day and it will release indomitable power in your mind. Your subconscious, which always resents any change, may say to you, you don't believe any such thing. But remember that your subconscious mind, in a sense, is one of the greatest liars in existence. It concurs in and sends back to you and your own errors about your abilities. You have created the negative attitude in your subconscious and it gives this error back to you. So just turn on your subconscious and say to it, "No, look here. I do believe that. I insist upon believing it. If you talk to your subconscious mind with that positiveness, in due course it will be convinced. One reason is because you are now feeding it positive thoughts. In other words, you are at last telling the truth to your subconscious. After a while, your subconscious mind will begin to send back the truth to you. The truth being that with the help of Jesus Christ, there isn't any obstacle you cannot overcome. An effective method for making your subconscious positive in character is to eliminate certain expressions of thought and speech, which we may call the little negatives. These so called little negatives clutter up the average person's conversation, and while each one is seemingly unimportant in itself, the total effect of these attitudes is to condition the mind negatively. When this thought of negatives first occurred to me, I began to analyze my own conversational habits and was shocked by what I found. I discovered that I was making such statements as, I'm afraid I'll be late, or I wonder if I'll have a flat tire, or I don't think I can do that, or I'll never get through this job. There's so much to do. If something turned out badly, I might say, oh, that's just what I expected. Or again, I might observe a few clouds in the sky and would gloomily state, I knew it was going to rain. These are little negatives to be sure, and a big thought is, of course, more powerful than a little one, but it must never be forgotten that mighty oaks from little acorns grow, and if a mass of little negatives clutter up your conversation, they are bound to seep into your mind. It is surprising how they accumulate in force, and presently, before you know it, they will grow into big negatives. So I determined to go to work on the little negatives and root them out of my conversation. I found that the best way to eliminate them was deliberately to say a positive word about everything. When you keep asserting that things are going to work out well, that you can do the job, that you will not have a flat tire, that you will get there on time, by talking up good results, you invoke the law of positive effects and good results occur. Things do turn out well. On a roadside billboard, I saw an advertisement of a certain brand of motor oil. The slogan read, a clean engine always delivers power. So will a mind free of negatives produce positives. That is to say, a clean mind will deliver power. Therefore, flush out your thoughts, give yourself a clean mental engine, remembering that a clean mind, even as a clean engine, always delivers power. So, to overcome your obstacles and live the I don't believe in defeat philosophy, cultivate a positive idea pattern deeply in your consciousness. What we do with obstacles is directly determined by our mental attitude. Most of our obstacles, as a matter of fact, are mental in character. Ah, you object. Mine are not mental, mine are real. Perhaps so, but your attitude toward them is mental. The only possible way you can have an attitude is by the mental process, and what you think about your obstacles largely determines what you do about them. Form the mental attitude that you cannot remove an obstacle and you will not remove it. Not if you think you can't, but get the idea firmly fixed that the obstacle is not so great as you previously considered it to be. Hold the idea that it is removable, and however faintly you entertain this positive thought, from the very moment you begin to think in this manner, the process is inaugurated, which will lead to its ultimate removal. If you have been long defeated by a difficulty, it is probably because you have told yourself for weeks, months, or even for years that there is nothing you can do about it. You have so emphasized your inability to yourself that your mind gradually accepted the conclusion upon which you have insisted, and when your mind is convinced, you are convinced. For as you think, so you are. But on the contrary, when you employ this new and creative concept, I can do all things through Christ, then you develop a new mental slant. Emphasize and re-emphasize that positive attitude, and you will finally convince your own consciousness that you can do something about difficulties. When at last your mind becomes convinced, astonishing results will begin to happen. of a sudden you discover that you have the power you would never acknowledge. I played golf with a man who was not only an excellent golfer but a philosopher as well. As we went around the golf course, the game itself drew out of him certain gems of wisdom, for one of which I shall ever be grateful. I hit a ball into the rough, into some high grass. When we came up to my ball, I said in some dismay, "No, just look at that. I certainly am in the rough. I had a bad lie. It's going to be tough getting out of here." My friend grinned and said, "Didn't I read something about positive thinking in your books?" Sheepily, I acknowledged that was such the case. "I wouldn't think negatively about that lie of yours," he said. "Do you think you could get a good hit of if this ball were lying on the fairway on the short grass?" I said, "I thought so." "Well," he continued, "why do you think you could do better out there than here?" "Because," I replied, "the grass is cut short on the fairway and the ball can get away better." Then he did a curious thing. "Let's get down on our hands and knees," he suggested, "and examine the situation. Let's see just how this ball does lie." So we got down on our knees and hands and he said, "Observe that the relative height of the ball here is about the same as it would be on the fairway. The only difference being that you have about 5 or 6 inches of grass above the ball." Then he did an even more whimsical thing. "Notice the quality and character of this grass," he said. He pulled off a blade and handed it to me. "Chew it," he said. I chewed and he asked, "Isn't that tender?" "Why, yes," I replied. "It certainly does seem to be tender grass." "Well," he continued, "an easy swing of your number 5 iron will cut through that grass almost like a knife." And then he gave me this sentence, which I am going to remember as long as I live, and I hope you will also. "The rough is only mental. In other words," he continued, "it is rough because you think it is. In your mind, you have decided that here is an obstacle which will cause you difficulty. The power to overcome this obstacle is in your mind. If you visualize yourself lifting that ball out of the rough, believing you can do it, your mind will transfer flexibility, rhythm, and power to your muscles, and you will handle that club in such a manner that the ball will rise right out of there in a beautiful shot. All you need to do is to keep your eye on that ball and tell yourself that you are going to lift it out of that grass with a lovely stroke. Let the stiffness and the tension go out of you. Hit it with exhilaration and power. Remember, the rough is only mental." To this day, I remember the thrill, the sense of power and delight I had in the clean shot that dropped the ball to the edge of the green. That is a very great fact to remember in connection with difficult problems. The rough is only mental. Your obstacles are present, all right. They are not fanciful, but they are not actually as difficult as they seem. Your mental attitude is the most important factor. Believe that Almighty God has put in you the power to lift yourself out of the rough by keeping your eye firmly fixed on the source of your power. Affirm to yourself that through this power you can do anything you have to do. Believe that this power is taking the tension out of you, that this power is flowing through you. Believe this and a sense of victory will come. Now take another look at that obstacle which has been bothering you. You will find that it isn't as formidable as you thought. Say to yourself, "The rough is only mental. I think victory, I get victory." Remember that formula. Write it on a piece of paper, put it in your wallet, stick it up on your mirror where you shave each morning, put it over the kitchen sink, put it on your dressing table and on your desk. Keep looking at it until its truth drives into the depths of your consciousness, until it permeates your whole mental attitude, until it becomes a positive obsession. "I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me." What may seem to be a difficult proposition is, as I have pointed out, hard or easy in proportion to how we think about it. It may be said that 3 men vitally affected the thought processes of Americans: Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and William James. Analyze the American mind even to this late date, and it is evident that the teachings of these 3 philosophers combine to create that particular genius of the American who is not defeated by obstacles and who accomplishes impossibles with amazing efficiency. A fundamental doctrine of Emerson is that the human personality can be touched with divine power and thus greatness can be released from it. William James pointed out that the greatest factor in any undertaking is one's belief about it. Thoreau told us that the secret of achievement is to hold a picture of a successful outcome in mind. Still, another wise American was Thomas Jefferson, who, like Franklin, set for his guidance a series of rules. Franklin had 13 daily rules, Jefferson only 10. One of Jefferson's rules was this, and I think it is priceless. Always take hold of things by the smooth handle. That is, go at a job or at your difficulty by the use of a method that will encounter the least resistance. Resistance causes friction in mechanics. Therefore, it is necessary in mechanics to overcome or reduce friction. The negative attitude is a friction approach. That is why negativism develops such great resistance. The positive approach is the smooth handle technique. It is in harmony with the flow of the universe. It not only encounters less resistance, but actually stimulates assistant forces. It is remarkable how from early life until the end of your earthly existence, the application of this philosophy will enable you to attain successful results in areas where otherwise you would be defeated. For example, a woman sent her 15-year-old son to us. She said she wanted him straightened out. It annoyed her to no end that her boy could never get over 70 in any of his studies. This boy has a great mind potentially, she declared proudly. How do you know he has a great mind? I asked. Because he is my son, she said. I graduated from college magna cum laude. The boy came in very glumly, so I asked, What's the matter, son? I don't know. My mother sent me to see you. Well, I commented, you don't seem to be burning with enthusiasm. Your mother says you get only 70s. Yes, he said, that's all I can get. And he added, that isn't the worst of it. I've even received less than that. Do you think you have a good mind, son? I asked. My mother says I have. I don't know. I think I'm awful dumb, Dr. Peale, he said earnestly. I study this stuff. At home I read it over once and then close the book and try to remember it. I repeat this process about 3 times and then I think that if 3 times doesn't get it into my head, how am I ever going to get it into my head? And then I go to school thinking maybe I have it and the teacher calls on me to say something and I stand up and can't remember a thing. Then, he said, examinations come along and I sit there and just get hot and cold all over and I can't think of the answers. I don't know why, he continued. I know that my mother was a great scholar. I guess I just haven't got it in me. This negative thought pattern, combined with the inferiority feeling stimulated by his mother's attitude, was of course overwhelming him. He froze up in his mind. His mother had never told him to go to school and study for the wonder and glory of learning knowledge. She was not wise enough to encourage him to compete with himself rather than with others, and she was constantly insisting that he duplicate her success in scholarship. Little wonder that under this pressure he froze mentally. I gave him some suggestions that proved helpful. Before you read your lessons, pause a moment and pray in this manner. Lord, I know I have a good mind and that I can get my work. Then, get yourself relaxed and read the book without strain. Imagine you are reading a story. Do not read it twice unless you wish. Simply believe that you got it on the first reading. Visualize the material as soaking in and germinating. The next morning as you go to school, say to yourself, I have a wonderful mother. She is a very pretty and sweet, but she must have been an old bookworm to get those high marks. And who wants to be an old bookworm anyway? I don't want to become a magna cum nothing. I only want to get through school creditably. In class, when the teacher calls on you, quickly pray before answering. Then believe the Lord will at that moment help your mind to deliver. When an examination is given, affirm in prayer that God is releasing your mind and that the right answers are given you. The boy followed these ideas, and what marks do you think he got the following semester? 90. I am sure that this boy, having discovered the amazing workability of the I don't believe in defeat philosophy, will employ the amazing power of positive thinking in all the affairs of his life. I could use so many illustrations of the manner in which men's lives have been revamped by these procedures that this book would grow to unwieldy size. Moreover, these are incidents and experiences out of everyday life that are in no way theoretical but are entirely practical. My mail is literally filled with testimonials sent by people who, having heard or read accounts I have told of victorious life experiences, have felt moved to relate similar occurrences in their own lives. Such a letter came from a gentleman who tells about his father as follows. I know several people who have used the plan in this letter with amazing results. My father was a traveling salesman. One time he sold furniture, another time hardware, sometimes it was leather goods. He changed his line every year. I would hear him telling mother that this was his last trip in stationery or in bed lamps or whatever it was he was selling at the moment. Next year everything would be different. We would be on easy street. He had a chance to go with a firm that had a product that sold itself. It was always the same. My father never had a product that sold. He was always tense, always afraid of himself, always whistling in the dark. Then one day a fellow salesman gave father a copy of a little 3-sentence prayer. He was told to repeat it just before calling on a customer. Father tried it and the results were almost miraculous. He sold 85% of all calls made during the first week, and every week thereafter the results were wonderful. Some weeks the percentage ran as high as 95, and father had 16 weeks in which he sold every customer called on. Father gave this prayer to several other salesmen, and in each case it brought astonishing results. The prayer my father used is as follows. I believe I am always divinely guided. I believe I will always take the right turn of the road. I believe God will always make a way where there is no way. The head of a small firm who had a great many difficulties in establishing his business told me that he was immeasurably helped by a technique which he invented. He had trouble, he said, with the tendency to blow up a small difficulty into a seemingly insurmountable obstacle. He knew that he was approaching his problems in a defeatist attitude, and had common sense enough to realize that these obstacles were not so difficult as he made them appear to be. As he told the story, I wondered if he did not make that curious psychological difficulty known as the will to fail. He employed a device which reconditioned his mental attitude and after a time had a noticeable effect on his business. He simply placed a large wire basket on his office desk. The following words were printed on a card and wired to this basket. With God, all things are possible. Whenever a problem came up which the old mechanism of defeat began to develop into a big difficulty, he threw the paper pertaining to it into the basket marked, With God, all things are possible, and let it rest there for a day or two. It is queer how each matter, when I took it out of that basket again, didn't seem difficult at all, he reported. In that act, he dramatized the mental attitude of putting the problem in God's hands. As a result, he received power to handle the problem normally and therefore successfully. As you finish this chapter, please say the following line aloud. I don't believe in defeat. Continue to affirm that until the idea dominates your subconscious attitudes.